It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the USA basketball's assistant coach, Dan Hughes. How are you doing today?
All good, thank you. All good.
Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to start working in professional sports and coaching?
Well, I wanted to coach. I don't know if my dreams were professional. To be honest with you, I was influenced at a real young age by a high school team and knew I wanted to be a coach, and then decided I wanted to be a college coach. And I was a college coach, but I was never a head coach. All of my head coaching was either in high school or in the professional ranks. And so it's just funny how life plays out.
Of course, what college did you coach at before you went to San Jose?
Well, I wasn't at San Jose. I coached at Mount Union College and Baldwin Wallace College in Ohio. They're Division III schools. Then I coached at the University of Toledo for 5 years on the men's side. I spent 20 years with men, and then I spent 23 coaching women. The majority of that in the WNBA as a head coach at that point. But that was more, those were my college's experiences.
What was it like to, of course, coach the men's and then obviously go to the women's and coach them for 20 more years?
Very similar, to be honest with you. It's the most asked question I've ever had over the last 20 years is people want to know the difference. And the truth is there's not much. They're players, and especially when you're talking about the higher levels of play, and not much differences. If I had to point to a couple things, there's a lot of verbal learners on the women's side. So you reach more in those kinds of ways. But then the other thing was that the women seemed more interested in how I coached their teammates than the guys did. But to be honest with you, not much difference.
What was it like for you to become the head coach and general manager of the Spurs?
Well, it wasn't the Spurs, it was the Silver Stars at that time. It was really a pivotal point in my career. I had been in Charlotte, and I had been in Cleveland, and had the ability to kind of turn the directions around of the teams. When I got to San Antonio, our first year wasn't very good as far as the ability to win games, get into playoffs, all those kind of things. And then the Spurs, which were the Spurs Sports and Entertainment, were actually in charge of this. They gave me the ability to not only be the coach, but to be the GM. And so when you have that ability, you can really put together teams in a very efficient way. And it was a blessing, and quite honestly, it's not because I had really produced a playoff team in year one, but they gave me the ability to impact the team. And then I did it for an awful long time. And it was really a successful correlation for most of the time, doing both jobs, although it's very cumbersome and not done all that much anymore.
Of course, what were some of your roles and responsibility as the general manager?
Well, it's all kinds. When you're talking about at that particular time in the WNBA, I think the WNBA has grown a lot, but I was a little bit of a one-man job with some really key people helping me. I created a situation where my trainer also doubled and did a lot of jobs for me. My strength and conditioning coach doubled and did a lot of jobs for me. My assistants really helped me, in regard to it. And so, we created a lot of full-time jobs and those type of things, but boy, they were more than just the lane they were in. But it really worked. We made money in San Antonio, which was important. We built the product, at that time, and we did it, pretty efficiently, to be honest with you.
What was it like during the draft day, drafting those players?
Well, that was my favorite day of the year. I mean, most assistant coaches would tell you that that's the day I absolutely enjoyed the most. It's exciting. It's a little bit, it's unpredictable. You have to be prepared. You have to be able to make decisions. You come in and you kind of have an idea of who's going to take who, but it does not always play out that way. If you want to watch a great show, watch Draft Day. I think it's called Draft Day. It's about football, about Kevin Costner's in it. There's some element of that that's kind of true. I found it to be an intriguing movie at that point, but it was the most exciting day that we had. Once that, you're on the clock and you got either 3 minutes or 5 minutes to make a selection. What people don't understand is behind the scenes, there's usually scenarios of trades, and you're sometimes negotiating what could be a deal in a matter of minutes as you're making that decision. But it just, to me, was also a lot of fun. I really enjoyed those days, and in most cases, people on that day feel pretty good about what you've done. And then there's a reality the next day as to how real good it was or wasn't.
Of course, what is it like to obviously see the people that you drafted make it into the league and be successful?
Very, very fulfilling. One of the best parts, I think, of being a GM or even being a coach. Very, very successful. But I think it's an interesting process. I really, as I look back, the ones that made me the happiest was like the second round picks or a third round pick that plays out. And I had an awful lot of second round picks that really became key players down the road. And those are kind of special. You take a special pride in being able to find someone in those kinds of positions, and then watching them make the team, and then watching them be successful. Those are the ones that look back. Sometimes if you got the number 2 or 3 pick of the overall draft, it's not a real, you kind of know where you might be taking that player, and it's a different thing. But when you're talking about the 24th pick or the 23rd pick or whatever, that's the ones you take a little pride in when they turn out to make your team and to be successful.
What was it like to obviously go into the broadcasting world?
Fun for me. It was my golf. I'm not a golfer, but it was just fun for me. And I quite honestly, I viewed it that way. I never really worked at getting jobs. I was lucky enough people would ask me to do things. And it gave me something that was about me. I had spent almost my whole life empowering others and needing them to be good for me to be successful. But when you do a broadcast, it's a little, your work, it's a team, you're working with your play-by-play, but it's about me. And I absolutely loved that. I loved that it was on my shoulders to do it. And it was about the only thing in my life that I really wasn't, when you're raising kids and when you're a coach and all those things, a lot of it's about, empowering those people. That particular thing to me was fun because it was about me. And I needed to be good.
Of course, what were some of your favorite moments while covering the Spurs when broadcasting them?
Oh, the couple favorite moments. I'm a music person. I really like music. Okay. and we were doing a broadcast, and I was working with just a great play-by-play guy, as most of them are in the NBA. And I used in my description of this moment, I think I said something like freedom tastes of reality. Okay, now that's a line from The Who in the rock opera Tommy. Okay, most people don't know that, but I was talking about a unique situation, and that's just what hit me in my head. And the play-by-play guy caught it and just continued right on. And I could not believe we made a connection on something, that's kind of as minute as that, in my head, that we connected. And that one, and I don't think most people on the broadcast even knew about it, but I knew about it. And I just thought it was a real cool moment.
That's pretty amazing. What was the transition like from obviously going from being a broadcaster to a head coach with this Seattle Storm?
Well, for me, can you see me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For some reason, I'm having a hard time seeing myself, but I'll go ahead. I thought it was an opportunity for me to move into broadcasting. I'd had a long and a very good career. And sometimes, you think what's about to happen, but in reality, life takes you a different way. There's another plan for yourself. And when Seattle came with and approached us about going to Seattle, because of the people that were there, my wife and I both just looked at each other and said, we got to do this. Now, they hadn't been successful yet, but you really felt like they could be. And then you had some people that I always had wanted to coach: Breonna Stewart, Jewel Lloyd, Sue Bird. I always wanted to coach them. I'd coached against them, but to get to coach them, you just decided, it's time to go back into coaching.
Of course, speaking about Suanna Bird and Brianna and stuff like that, what was it like to coach again with them and to coach them to play?
Absolute blessing. I mean, you're talking about players that are of an incredible talent, but also in mentality. And you just didn't want to screw them up. You wanted to put them in positions to be successful and empower them to be as good as they could be. But the beginning point was well established for you because they're already good players.
Of course, while in the WNBA, what was it like to coach against teams like the New York Liberty and other teams like the Chicago Sky?
Well, the New York Liberty, to be honest with you, that was my favorite venue to coach in. Of all the places that I have gone to coach that wasn't what we would call home, I loved coaching in the Garden. Absolutely loved it. Matter of fact, when I retired the first time, they were nice enough to send me a picture of what they thought was the last time I was going to coach there. And I framed it. I have it on my wall downstairs, still do. So you have to understand my career to go back to the days when the Liberty played in the Garden at that point. And we played a lot of Sunday afternoon games at 4:00. And back in the day when Richie Adubato was their coach and so on and so on. And just had a long history with him. And I was in Cleveland and we had an incredible rivalry. And played each other several times. Matter of fact, then I ended up trading for and working with a lot of the players that I had competed against when I got to San Antonio. I respected them so much in that regard. And in the Chicago Sky, it's really been interesting because as that franchise was established, Now they're headed up by James Wade, who was my assistant. So there's always an interesting feeling when you go against your assistant, because I gave him his first job when he quit playing professionally. And I like Chicago. My mother's from Chicago, so it's always a special trip for me for some of those reasons. But it's always a mixed feeling when you're playing against someone who you worked with and was very, very influential in helping me, and now you compete against them. But that has happened so much in my career. I mean, almost half the league's my former assistants. So it was not an unusual situation that we found ourselves.
What are some similarities and differences between coaching, obviously, in the NBA and the WNBA?
Well, I never coached per se in the NBA, but what I would perceive in a lot of ways is, you're dealing with much larger staffs. And, as you look at the WNBA staffs have grown, but they're nowhere near the numbers of people that represent a staff in the NBA. And there's actually more players in the NBA. There is the inclusion of G League and a lot of things. So the totality in the WNBA is just greater. I mean, there's just more things you've got to make sure you've got an understanding of and a hand in helping empower as you look at it, in regard to it. But that's the only coaching experience I haven't had that as you look at coaching in the NBA. I'm not an expert in that, but I've had a lot of experiences in high school and college, and certainly the WNBA. But I study the NBA exclusively. I watch all kinds of NBA basketball, and quite honestly know a lot of people because of my affiliation with the NBA at 3 out of the 4 places that I coached. So I'm fascinated, find it to be the absolute pinnacle of what I think basketball is all about. So, it's a great question. And I think there's an awful lot of similarities in dealing with professional people, whether it's NBA or WNBA.
What is it like to coach in the WNBA and also to be the assistant coach for the U.S. Men's Olympics team?
Well, I was with the women's, but it was an honor, to be honest with you. Being asked to coach for your country, being asked to coach in the World Cup and the Olympics is the absolute pinnacle of what you do in your professions. And so it's an honor, number one. And then number two, you just, you try very hard to, the culture that you find yourself with, especially on the women's side, everybody just kind of looks and sees how they can be helpful, and you put aside your egos and you focus on, okay, what can I bring to this, or what can I support to make us gold medal worthy?
Of course, as you're the assistant coach for the U.S. women's team, what is it like to coach with, to coach up, of course, Sue Bird, who obviously you coached in the WNBA?
Well, it continues to be a very learning experience because she has a presence even with the various Olympic teams she's been a part of, and you watch how that presence impacts the totality of her teammates or even the coaches. I mean, she's as good a leader as the game of basketball has ever seen, and you watch that leadership come out in international settings, just like you had seen it come out in the WNBA.
What was this previous year like coaching in the Olympics?
Very unique. I don't think unlike anything that any other Olympic year has seen. When you went to the games in Tokyo, you really didn't see Tokyo. You couldn't even, we couldn't even take a walk outside the hotel. You were pretty much in a bubble, where your bubble was, where you met and ate, and where you walked out of the hotel right onto the bus. The bus took you to the practice facility or to the arena, and then brought you right back. And when you weren't in one of those places, you were in your room, and you protected your health. And the players were amazing, but you worked very hard to protect your health so that you could complete this mission that you had to win the gold.
Of course, what was your time like in the Olympics this previous year? And did y'all win the gold? And what was
Yes.
that like when you won the gold and you were awarded it?
Oh, it's an amazing feeling to represent your country. It spurs a lot of emotions. It's something that you're going to put in your mind and never forget that moment. When they raise the flag, or you see the athletes on the stand, in the middle, and when you see the flag of the United States and our national anthem being played as it goes to the rafters, your emotions are high, and it's something I don't know. I can't imagine ever not going right back to that moment and feeling the chill that, just the warming feeling that you have, goosebumps is what I meant to say, and the warm feeling that you have for representing your country.
What was it like, obviously, wearing the polo with the US and having the Olympic rings on the polo?
Uh, Pretty amazing, and it's, for most of us, when you go through it, you don't, as coaches, you don't go through it multiple times. There are examples Gino Auriemma has, and there's examples of it, but most of us coaches go through it one time. And so, a lot of it's happening, and you're just like, wow. There's a wow factor to it, and you just try to soak it in. You're focused on a lot of things so much of the time, but you also want to just be able to look to your left and right and realize where you are and what you're doing and how unique that moment is.
Of course, how has the Olympics this previous year helped you in your coaching career as you look into this upcoming year with obviously the WNBA starting?
Well, it was unique for me because to me, it was more about being the final stage of my coaching career in a lot of ways. I don't know what the future holds, but I had determined that I was done being a WNBA head coach at that point, and this would be the final stage. So it's a little different, for those coaches and athletes that got to run right back and go to their teams. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. I've been around enough to watch that happen, but for me, it was a blessing that this came in a later stage of my career, and being able to be a part of this and having this be a vivid memory of the last chapter, so to speak, of this section of my life. I'm going to continue to do a lot of things, but it may not be exactly like this.
Of course, as you said that, what is it like to obviously retire in coaching on the biggest stage of them all?
Well, that's a blessing. A lot of us don't get that chance. A lot of us, and to end with a win, a gold medal win, being a part of that is, you feel like you've been blessed. It's just not how most coaches walk away. They walk away in various situations, players too. But to me, it was a blessing that this is going to be in my mind as I go into the next stage of my life.
Of course, with retiring from coaching, What are some of the things that you have reflected on that obviously you're like, oh my God, I've done this, this, and this?
Well, that's a really good question. I haven't quite got there. I reflect mostly on the relationships, on the relationships that you form with players, with coaches that work with you, with your competitors. I mean, that's where all my thoughts go, to be honest with you, is those relationships. And I'm glad that I built a lot of relationships through the years, because those are the ones that I haven't really allowed myself to kind of look at achievements in that way yet. What I have looked though at and do think about is the people that I shared this journey with. And very thankful for those relationships, because I have quite a few really good relationships that they're going on with their lives, whether they're players or coaches, and I get to enjoy watching them.
What is something that you learn now that your coaching career has ended?
Well, uh, hopefully you evolve. Um, you find yourself wiser as it goes along. I look back at some of the way I coached at certain points. I wouldn't change it, but I also feel like I am glad I evolved. I am glad that I had the ability to use my staff better than I probably did. I am glad I wasn't such a pain to the officials at the end as I was at the beginning. Some things like that, I am glad I evolved. I wouldn't necessarily change it, but because I think I did pay attention to the journey. I did pay attention to how I could get better. And so I'm thankful for that. But I'm also glad that I was a different coach, I think, in some pivotal ways at the end of my career, as opposed to maybe just staying on the same path the whole way. I evolved.
What advice would you give people that are looking to get into coaching on the professional level and even on the national level to represent, obviously, the USA in the Olympics?
Well, the best thing I would tell them, and I share this quite a bit, is just be most concerned where you are right now. You know, uh, Wanting to do those things is wonderful, but you can't spend your time wanting to do it. What tends to happen is if you do a great job where you are, that's going to lead you a notch closer to doing those things. And so take your focus right back and take your joy back to right where you are and go do a good job there, and let that journey of doing a good job there take you to what might be next, and then what might be next. If you spend your whole time trying to figure out how to get to the fourth quarter, you don't play the first, the second, and the third.
That's wonderful advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
Well, that's a good one. I don't know if I'm really out there that much, in regard to it. There's probably the best thing, to do in a lot of cases for me is I speak a great deal. I could probably do a podcast a day, and I travel and I speak. It's just identify with, follow me through Facebook or through something and find out where I'm speaking. And then a lot of times through I'm fortunate enough to be speaking in various ways over the next year.
That's wonderful. Thank you again, Coach Dan Hughes, for your interview, and best of luck in your future wherever it may hold you.
Sure enough. Take care.
Thank you. You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Coach Dan Hughes, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
Appreciate it.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.